today to introduce to Madison South Rotary Fire Chief Stephen Davis. He's served the city of Madison since 1989. Chief Davis has held positions within the department as a firefighter, paramedic, training officer, fire lieutenant, division fire chief of training before being promoted to the fire chief in 2012. Chief Davis earned an associate's degree in fire science from METC and a bachelor's of science degree from Columbia Southern University. Chief Davis is a state of Wisconsin certified fire instructor and has developed many training programs locally as well as district-wide. He has also been involved with Lake Rescue, the Hazardous Incident Team, and Heaven Urban Rescue Team. Chief Davis is a certified dive master and was the former Lake Rescue Team coordinator, as well as an original member of the department's technical rescue team. Chief Davis will be retiring on April 1st this year after over 32 years of service to the city of Madison. Madison South Rotary, please help me in welcoming Chief Steve Davis.
Thank you. Are we good here? Do I need to tip it up a little bit? I'm a little bit taller than Joe.
There you go. That looks great.
Well, thank you for the nice, warm South Rotary welcome, South Madison Rotary welcome. It's always a pleasure to come and speak. A lot of familiar faces on Zoom and in the room. And I have not done a hybrid presentation yet. Talk to the actual people in the room and then the cyber world. So we'll see how this goes. I can tell you those questions, whoever came up with those were stumpers. I knew that Ben Franklin created the very first volunteer fire department in the country, but I didn't realize they called it his bucket brigade, which is good. The polls we still have in the city of Madison. In fact, OSHA does no longer approve them as a means of egress from our bunk rooms above the stations, but we're grandfathered because we had them when they put them in the 50s. But Station 6, right next door, is going to start a remodel project in the middle of April. We're going to actually move those folks to the old town of Madison fire station as we bring Station 6 up to today's standards for sustainability and whatnot. And we're putting a slide in for those folks to get from the bedroom, like a regular old kid's slide. Yeah, no, I'm sure at some point there will be, but I don't necessarily need to know about that. So slides are actually kind of the hit thing now for departments, but thank you for allowing me to be here. And just a little bit about me. As Joe said, I started in 1989 in the city of Madison. I was assigned at Station 10 on the north side when I came on. Totally different fire department today than it was in 1989. And as an example, when I walked into the fire station my first day, the smoke was banked down to about here as the old firefighters would sit and smoke cigarettes at the kitchen table. And, you know, we're certainly nowhere near that anymore in the Madison Fire Department. In fact, I don't know that we have a member in our organization that smokes cigarettes anymore. So, but it's been a great career in the city. And looking back, somebody asked me on Saturday, how much did chow cost? Our firefighters come in, they throw in money every day. Somebody gets assigned that day to cook. They go to the store, they buy their groceries, they come back. And it's $15 today. And when I started in 1989, it was $6. And it had just gone up about 6 months prior, and the old timers were really upset about it. It went from $5 to $6. And so a lot of changes have occurred in the last 32 years. And if you have questions either online, raise your hand or somebody can jump in. I do have one comment to Aaron West out in Florida. I wish you'd cheer up a little bit. Before we get started though, if you have questions in the room too, just feel free to ask as I talk. I'm going to talk just a little bit about the Madison Fire Department today and do probably some comparables over the things that I've seen in the last 32 plus years change in the fire service. And, you know, currently when we say the fire department, the first thing you think of is, yeah, we fight fires, right? But the fire service has evolved into much more than that. And probably one of the biggest areas that the service has evolved is around the EMS world, our emergency medical services. In the city of Madison, we have 14 fire stations. We have 12 engine companies. So they're the ones that bring the water to the fire with the hoses and things. We have 5 ladder companies. Station 6 next door has a ladder truck in it and an ambulance. And then we have 9 ambulances. We put our 9th ambulance in service in January. All told, we do about 35,000 calls a year for service on the fire and EMS side. And about 70% of those calls are related to medical type emergencies or trauma. And so we call ourselves the fire department, but the majority of the work we do is around EMS. And I'll touch on some of the things that we do in the EMS world here eventually. We have 88 people on duty every day across those 14 fire stations. And we handle all the lake rescue calls for Lake Mendota, Lake Monona, really Lake Wabisa as well. And then any special requests. So we're the only subsurface rescue team in the county. So we go out, we try and dive on a victim if they're under the water. And we typically, based on what we know about cold water drownings, we typically will dive for about an hour before we call it off. And then we turn it over to the sheriff's department because at that point it becomes a recovery. We have a hazardous materials team that's funded through some subsidies with the state of Wisconsin. The state of Wisconsin has an overall hazardous materials response team in the state. We are one of, I believe it's 8 type 2 teams in the state. So we cover about a 5-county region. We go from Jefferson County all the way to the Mississippi River, and then north as far as if you drew a line across Columbia County. So that is our response area for the city of Madison. We used to be a little bit more active in hazardous material responses where we would go out and actually be on scene and deal with any chemical spills or things like that. And we play more of a consulting role now. So we try to get the local jurisdiction just to handle the problem and consult with our scientists that are on duty. And that system works out pretty well. So we actually leave the city with that team maybe about 6 times a year is all now. And we used to go out about 75 times a year. So we do a lot of consulting work. And then the last special team that we have within the fire department is our technical rescue team, which we call it heavy urban rescue. And so they do high angle, they do low angle rope type rescues. They do excavation type incidences below grade. They do confined space and building collapse. And the city of Madison was part of a bigger state response program back after 9/11 occurred. The federal government dumped a lot of money into local and state organizations to create these heavy urban rescue teams based on, the experiences in New York City. And so we were part of the team up until about 2006. And the state went a different direction. Madison and Milwaukee dropped out of the program. And I'm happy to announce we're on the cusp of getting back into the program. The state legislature just passed some monies to make it a little bit more lucrative for Madison to join back with that statewide team. So those are, we of course, in the meantime, fight fires as well. And we see about 1 structure fire a day in the city of Madison, believe it or not. Our goal always is to get a vehicle on scene within the first 5 minutes from the 911 call. So if you call 911, the dispatcher has less than a minute to get us on the road and get going to provide service. And then our goal, of course, is to get to you within 5 minutes or less, which we achieve about 85 to 90% of the time based on how our stations are. So that's a little bit about the Madison Fire Department, and EMS is really one of our bread and butters. And so we have a pretty robust paramedic system in our city, and we're very, very fortunate to have it. We work with the University of Wisconsin with a consortium of doctors that come in and provide essentially emergency room care in your living room. So the paramedics are trained to a very high level. They can give you any type of drug. If your heart's beating too fast, they can slow it down. If it's beating too slow, they can speed it up. They deal with allergic reactions and, you know, just any medical emergency you can possibly think of. Our paramedics can really handle right in your living room. And like I say, we're supported by the University of Wisconsin hospitals and clinics with that. We have a medical director that's on staff and we're contracted for 20 hours a week, but she actually works about 40 hours a week, making sure our paramedics stay up to date on the latest and greatest developments in the medical world. Any questions so far? Yeah.
What's the training look like for those heavy urban rescue teams? It's something I haven't even thought of. I mean, is it?
Yeah, that's
the teams do regularly?
Yeah, so that's a great question. The state took some of that federal money years ago and invested in what they call the REACT Center. And it's a all hazards, all climate, all element training center at Volk Field. So when you drive by Volk Field on the interstate, you can see some of the buildings kind of on their campus. And they created this site, and it's got rubble piles, it's got trenches for doing trench rescue. It's pretty much got anything you can think of. It's got buildings that are racked sideways so the teams can go in and support those. And the state pretty much runs that and funds it and keeps it going. The instructors that they have there do a lot of contract work with the US Army and some of the military, and also some of the other federal urban search and rescue teams that they'll come in there. The training itself usually is about 120 hours before you're kind of blessed in all the disciplines. And it starts slow and you work up into that building collapse scenario. You start, you know, hanging off the side of a building, rappelling, and then as the training goes on, they put it all together for you. Yeah.
Does everybody go through that, or give a special?
Nope. So we have special people, if you will, that show interest in it. All of our special teams, when we have openings on the teams, people apply and they go through a process, and then they're selected to be part of the team that they're interested in. And then usually the training starts. So it takes us usually about a year if we have a member that steps down from a team to get that person replaced with all the training, whether it's lake rescue, hazmat, or tech rescue. Great question.
These are already trained fire.
Yep. And so I think it's right now, currently you have to have 42 months on the job or 3.5 years to apply to be on one of the special teams. So you come in as some seasoning underneath your belt and some experiences. Same thing with paramedic. Our paramedics usually are all firefighters for the first couple of years, and then they go to paramedic school before they get on the ambulance and start.
Who pays for like that? Extra training for the paramedics.
You do.
How expensive is that to take somebody through the program to get them? I don't know how many years, it's a couple of years or something.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we used to actually do our pre-paramedic training or our paramedic training through university hospitals. And the costs were a little bit more expensive. Currently, we use Madison College for the initial training, and that's brought the cost down quite a bit because the college actually I'm sure some of you in the room know more about this, but they have ways of getting reimbursed federally. So the cost went from, we would probably pay about $25,000 per student at the university. And I think currently we pay about $2,000. So it's but you know, the reimbursements and, you know, however that works on the backside changes a lot of things. So good question though. Yeah.
So what you mentioned before about the EMS being able, like, it's an emergency, you're right in your living room.
Mm-hmm.
Many years ago, my daughter swallowed a coin
Mm-hmm.
and it was brilliant. I mean, really worked right there in our living room.
Yeah.
But they also showed up with a ladder truck, a
Yep.
couple others. Is that protocol?
Yeah. So, and that's a great question, and it's a great lead in because that's where I was headed next. Probably the biggest question I get as fire chief is, hey, chief, I called for an ambulance and a fire engine showed up. What gives? And so all of our firefighters are medically trained as an EMT basic. So they have a basic minimum of medical care, which includes a lot of advanced skills, a lot more than when I rode the engine. So they can do all the cardiac stuff. They can give epi. They can do all kinds of different things now as an EMT basic. But the system is set up. We have 14 stations. We only have 9 ambulances. So depending on how the call comes into the 911 center dictates whether you get an engine or an ambulance. If it's what we call a higher acuity call, meaning I call, I'm having chest pains, I don't feel real well, that's gonna fall in a level of a higher acuity where we send 6 people instead of just 2 paramedics. Or that ambulance is maybe out of territory or in a different territory coming in, and we want to get help on scene in that first 5 minutes. So we always send the closest, quickest unit. I sprained my finger, therefore I need to go to the hospital and a fire engine shows up. It's most likely because the ambulance was either out of their territory or on another call or coming from a different location. And so everybody gets the same level of care. We start at that basic level and then expand up into the paramedic level. But great question. And it's the number 1 question the fire chief gets, especially at the Optimist Club and the Rotary clubs. So.
Ask Tara if there's any questions online.
Tara, do you have any questions online yet?
No, I haven't seen anything.
Okay, so what time do you want me wrapped up?
Whatever you want.
I'll just touch on some of the things that have come to light in that EMS world in the last few years. So we have a pretty robust fire prevention division within the department. And there was a report that came out in the 1970s from the federal government called America's Burning. And they basically said in that report, to summarize, that was back when New York was on fire and Chicago, a lot of the major cities, that 1, you need smoke detectors, and 2, the best way to not have a fire is to not have it happen, right? So put your emphasis for communities on prevention, which we've done a great job of in the city of Madison. We have inspectors that inspect the buildings, keep them safe, keep detection systems working, suppression systems, those types of things. And so in about the year 2000, let's just go with, the fire service provides a lot of EMS, a lot of fire-based EMS systems occur across the country. So Madison's not unusual that we have ambulances and EMS in our fire department. The EMS started in 1972. We were actually the 2nd or 3rd community in the country to go to a paramedic level. And those of you young enough to remember the show Emergency with Johnny and Roy, LA County actually was the first paramedic service in the country. It's up for debate whether it was Seattle or Madison that came next. Of course, Dr. Birnbaum was our former medical director, would tell you that we actually were before LA County as well. But anyway, I'm digressing a little bit. But we started to see an uptick in probably a lack of education on when to call 911 for a medical emergency. And so we kind of put our heads together in our community and said, we need to start working more along the lines of that fire prevention model and say, you know, how can we prevent some of these medical emergencies? How can we keep people in their homes? And so, and it wasn't until 2012 that that we started what we referred to as our community paramedic program. In our community paramedic program, we worked with Meritor Hospital in the beginning, and the Meritor Foundation gave us some dollars to get this program started. And what we did is, and we still do today, is we go in and work with the physicians at Meritor's ER, and they're the ones that see a lot of the what we refer to as ambulance alumni or frequent flyers, people that repeatedly call 911 for an ambulance. And so Meritor gave us some startup money to start this program, and we started with one person in there, and we would had a case reviewer at Meritor, and we'd go in and every month look at the 10 most abusers in their ER system, in our fire system, and just started to go out and make contact with them proactively and say, how can we give you incentives to not call us and not want to go to the ER, as terrible as it sounds. But and what we found is a lot of people were just lonely. A lot of people had alcohol and drug issues. A lot of people had some mental health underlying issues. And so we started to work with these folks to keep them from come up with alternatives other than calling 911. And in the first 6 months of that program, we saved Meritor Hospital about $500,000 in readmittance charges. And so we knew we were onto something. So we took that model and we leveraged it with an MIH grant, and we found a doctor out in New York, in Syracuse, that happened to be coming to the city of Madison to work at the UW, and he brought with him his grant that was quite a bit more sizable. So we were able to leverage that grant and the Meritor Foundation into a team of 4 that we see today that has a tremendous caseload. There's parameters around who they work with. Some of them, some elderly patients, some mental health patients, those types of things. But really what their idea is when we start to see a frequent flyer, somebody that continues to call us, they go in and they work with that person proactively to make sure their meds are right, their nutrition's right. They come up with incentives for them to not call. They do education on what an emergency is and what isn't. And so it's probably one of the most proud I am as fire chief. And I talk about it a lot because we started it after I took over as chief. And a lot of it comes from my experiences on the ambulance. When I was a paramedic, I rode downtown and we saw so many people with mental health, alcohol and drug problems, and there just was never a place to put them and like figure out a way to work with them to educate them and get a little bit of life coaching in them. And so we started that. It's very successful today, and we don't talk a lot about it just because they're just doing the work, and it just hasn't been a real flashy thing to talk about. But I would guess that the city has saved a couple of $1 million in the last 10 years with not transporting a lot of these folks to the ER. And then lastly, I want to touch on the CARES program. I'm sure you've seen a lot about that in the city of Madison. And CARES stands for Community Alternative Response to Emergency Services. And it's our mental health ambulance. And the mental health ambulance selfishly was an idea that an alder and I worked on a few years ago. And I was just trying to get another ambulance in our service because our ambulances are so busy. And of course, I'm not going to get real political, but sometimes the basic services, I think, drift from our community occasionally. And so you have to come up with these creative ways of justification. And this mental health ambulance concept was just that. We wanted to put an ambulance in service that focused on mental health emergencies. and also did chest pains, by the way, when needed. And so it kind of died on the vine. And after some of the things you've seen in society around policing and the mental health issues that the police run into, a couple of years ago, it came back up to the surface with our Common Council, and we were able to implement it. To date, the team has been, and so I'll explain the team a little bit. It's a crisis worker from Journey Mental Health paired with a paramedic. And the idea is they respond in a minivan right now. They get on scene. The 911 center takes a call for a person in a mental health crisis. There's no weapons involved. There's no violence involved. It's, let's just say, somebody maybe that has about a depression. And so that's a normal call that Madison police would normally have to deal with and try and figure out a way to get this person help and care. And fundamentally for me, I've always thought that was wrong. I always think that mental health patients, it's an actual health emergency. It's not a law enforcement emergency. And so for a number of years now, and we could probably debate nationally what's happened in society with mental health crisis, but it basically got laid at the feet of the police departments with no resources to deal with it, mental health. And so this is our attempt at getting it off of the plate of the police department and getting these folks in the proper area. Now we're in a good position because we have got this crisis worker, we've got this paramedic. The paramedic rules out any underlying medical problems, sometimes diabetes or other medical conditions can show as or present as a mental health crisis. Once the medical side is ruled stable, then the crisis worker works with the paramedic and they take over the intervention and the care. And the nice thing about it is the state law hasn't caught up to this yet. Now, I don't know what the hell's going to happen when they actually do, but right now they can truly transport these folks anywhere they need to go. So if they need to see their primary care physician, they can take them there. If they need to go to a clinic, they can take them there. If they need to go for mental health intervention, they can take them there at the hospitals that provide that service, things like that. So we're really on the cutting edge and the cusp of something pretty spectacular, I think, in this city to deal with mental health and to try and offload it off the current emergency services that we have. We've modeled the team after a team called Cahoots in Eugene, Oregon, that was funded and is funded today through the Whitebird Clinic in Eugene. And they've had a team in place doing this work for about 25 years. And then the other team we look closely at, and it's relatively new and in its infancy as well, is the STAR team in Denver, which does a similar thing. And so the goal of this team, though, is to really create a space for somebody in a mental health crisis to be able to have that mental health crisis and get the treatment they need. So I'm probably running short on time. Anybody have any questions real quick? Yeah.
Every year at Christmas, I worry.
Uh-huh.
I put my stockings up across my, above the fireplace,
Mhm.
the gas burning fireplace, and that gets so hot there. I'm always worried, could that start a fire? I always move the longest stockings to the edge when I have it on, but I don't think that would really help. But is that an issue?
Yes, it could be, without getting into Chief Davis's fire behavior 101. You know, the thing is if you keep your fireplace at a slow roar and keep things away from it, the heat transfer is probably not going to be enough to start your stockings on fire. It's all going to be fire size dependent. But if you're worried about it and you think it, you should do it and like take them down while you got a big cooker going in there. Mhm.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Last year, about how many calls did the ambulance department get regarding illegal drugs?
Oh God, Glenn, you caught me without a number in my head. We well, we work with Joe's former team through the MARIA grant and really track overdoses pretty well. I would be making it up if I told you a number.
MPD is about 250 a year,
Yeah,
just MPD, and then you guys go on more.
yeah. And those are just the ones where they use Narcan,
Yep.
where they track those. And so we see quite a bit more than that because it's not, so the police department a few years ago started carrying Narcan, but they don't always give it on an overdose. It just depends on some of the situations and things. I think the scary part about the overdoses is the multiples that we see. So we'll get on a 911 call and there's not one person down, but 2 or 3 overdosed. And, you know, that's something that we've seen the last couple of years that we hadn't seen prior to in previous years. So, you know, we're ready to handle anyone that goes down, but it's always a curveball when we see multiples down. So any other questions online or anything?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So what are the guidelines that the 911 center follows in order to determine whether it's a mental health crisis or, you know, something else?
Yes, that's a great question. And it's a question we get quite frequently. They have a set of certified protocols, and the term right now is slipping my mind, that the call taker has to ask before they send the team. And I don't know all the specific questions, but a couple of the big questions are, is there violence? So is the person like threatening somebody with a weapon, threatening somebody verbally? All those types of calls, if there's a threat or if there's weapons involved, even as much as do you have weapons in your home, even if the person says, yes, I have weapons in my home, but I'm not going to use them, those then trigger to the police department. So the police department goes on those calls first. They'll go in, secure the scene, and then turn the scene back over to the CARES team. And so there's very specific questions that dispatcher asks. But a great question.
Unfortunately, if it's dark and at night, sometimes the caller doesn't know if there's a weapon or not in a pocket or.
Well, interestingly enough, we only work during the day, believe it or not. So, and this is true, and it's based on data. When we looked at, I don't know, like 7 years worth of data from the Madison Police Department and their mental health team, it's Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. are the hotspots for mental health crisis in our community. And I would have bet you paychecks that it was going to be on the weekends and wee hours of the night. And essentially the team, the mental health responses totally drop off at nighttime and on weekends. And I can't explain it. So our team is set up to work 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday. Yeah.
So I had a question for my 7-year-old daughter this weekend as we were driving by the Capitol. Will Madison ever have taller buildings in the city? And I said, I don't know. And so is there a law or ordinance in Madison about the max height of a building? And
Yes.
is it related to the Capitol height?
Yes. There's several ordinances on the books. One of them, though, the view can never be blocked at the Capitol from, I think it's 360. I think there's a mileage set to that as well. Like when you can see the Capitol from the interstate by Home Depot on the east side. And I would have to look at the ordinance, but yes, in fact, which from a fire chief's perspective, it makes it great because our tallest building is only 18 stories and that's Van Heist Hall. And so when you start to get into buildings for firefighters, it totally changes the game on how we handle fires in tall buildings. And so we really have a medium response to a structure fire in a high rise, where other cities like New York, where they have the 85, 90-story buildings, their response totally changes. Mhm.
All right, I think I'm gonna jump in here, Steve. We got a little presentation we want to do for you, and usually our speakers that come before Rotary every week, we usually don't treat like we're going to treat you right now, because you, sir, are special. The Madison Fire Department is special. I believe we're closing in on the 50-year anniversary of Fire Station Forum on Rose Street. I think it was built in 72, thereabouts. For 50 plus years, the Madison South Rotary Club and Madison Fire Department have had a very unique relationship on football Saturdays that has allowed us to raise over $1 million to support nonprofits in this community in 50 years. And Steve, we are forever grateful to everybody that has worked at Station 4 and continues to work there today on what we do every football Saturday down there in that parking lot, that over 7 games helps us bring in net $50,000 a year roughly. On behalf of the Madison South Rotary Foundation Board of Directors, we want to present to you today a $500 grant donation to the Mobile Health Advocacy Foundation, which I believe was started just recently by that team of paramedics that retired. So in your recognition of your 30 plus years and being such a great leader of this community, we are proud to give this to you,
Well,
Steve.
thank you very much.
You bet.
Appreciate it.
Congratulations.
Very much. And if I can just talk briefly about this group that it's going to. Joe, actually, I don't know if he's told you, but we've been friends for a lot of years. And when he started his Madison Community Policing Foundation, we had just started our community paramedic system. And what we found early on is that the grant I spoke about through the Meritor Foundation was really good at giving those community paramedics a few extra tools here and there. And when I'm saying that, I'm saying like a couch or a cell phone, or somebody couldn't go to their appointment because they didn't have a cell phone to make the appointment, those types of things. And so we decided to create a nonprofit group, the Mobile Health Advocacy Foundation, to cover some of those incidentals with the people that work. To date, we have about $4,500 in the account. Slotskis, I can never say that right. Deli did a weekend proceeds for us and kind of got the thing started. And then it's run by a group of retirees from the Madison Fire Department. And Joe walked us through setting up the foundation. And we're forever grateful for that, because he had just done it and it was pretty simple to do based on his guidance. So thank you very much, Southside Rotary. We really do appreciate it. And like I said, we use this to buy incidentals for patients. So cell phones, subway cards for sandwiches, those types of things. So it's those little things that really, really change people's lives.
Appreciate that. And,
Yep.
I think Aaron's gonna take it back over here.
Okay, well, thank you.
Sure. Yeah, thank you so much, Chief Davis. It's really awesome to hear about your work, and we're glad to be able to support the future of your organization, the new charitable organization you have, and continuing our relationship with the fire station down at the Broad Stand so that we can raise money for our community grants as well. So Dan, you want to announce who our speaker next week will be?
Yes.
And then you can ring the bell.
I get to ring the bell too. Oh, good.
Yeah.
Melissa Menning, Program Director from the Road Home, is going to be here to talk to us about homelessness in Madison. I get to ring the bell.
Yeah.
Sure.
See you all next week.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.